Cattle Battle.
Welcome back to the Ranch It Up Radio Show, the most information packed into a 30-minute program that you can find at your All Things Ranching newscast, and so glad to be hanging out with y'all. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, rants, it doesn't matter. You can call or you can text 707-RANCH20. That's 707-726-2420. Our email is ranchitupshow@gmail.com. Prowling around social media at Ranch It Up Show. Now let's talk stocker cattle. Now, if you're like Beck and I, we're watching these markets very closely to see if purchasing grass cattle is a viable fit for our operation. Now, along with the simple projections of if we can make them work, comes the conversation about gain, potential gain, and spinning off that needs to come the discussion about implants. Now, we're bringing this up now to get these different options rolling around in one's mind. Bryan Bernhard joins us today. Bryan is a technical service nutritionalist with the Strategic Technical Services Beef Team for Zoetis. Hey, Bryan, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's talk implants in stocker cattle first. Let's talk the pros and cons.
You know, as I look at stocker implants, and it doesn't matter what stage we're talking about implants, is a calf's body naturally produces hormones, and those hormones tell the muscle cells to grow larger. When that calf is born, it weighs 80 pounds. It has the same number of muscle cells as when it goes to harvest and weighs 1,500 pounds. The muscle cells just grow larger. They don't get any more. And so all hormones are chemicals in the body that tell one part of the body to do something differently. And so when we administer an implant in the ear, we're helping that system. We're telling the muscle cell to grow larger. And so great thing about implants is it's a pretty low investment with an extremely high ROI. You know, in a stocker operation, an implant could add a quarter pound a day pretty easily, right? So you're grazing 100 days, that's 25 pounds. Today's market, that's worth, you know, let's just say an easy $3 market, you know, for simple math, $75, right? So there's a lot of potential value there. You know, if you start thinking about downside, I don't, not a lot come to mind. You know, maybe if somebody's just roughing something over the winter and only wants them to do a half a pound a day because they're trying to stretch them, maybe then we're not needing for an implant. But, you know, most of the guys are trying to gain pound and a half, 2.5 pounds. You know, I think there's some real opportunities to get some additional value, some additional gain out of those cattle.
Because of the nature of how lots of us producers run stocker cattle, pasture cattle I'm going to key in on. We spend some time getting them used to their new surroundings, maybe used to electric fence, maybe where the water is, monitoring their health. So do you think that because of this, meaning pasture, grazing cattle, sometimes we neglect the nutrition? Even, you know, I know that nutritionalists tend to not call on us guys as much as they would maybe call on the feeder guys or the confinement operators.
Well, I think a lot of stocker guys, their goal is to get those cattle healthy, right? They're trying to buy let's say a high risk calf that weighs 400 or 500 pounds, right? And they're trying to turn them into a high valued yearling that the feedlot wants, right? And so it seems like so much of their time is focused on the health. I'm not going to say they forget about the nutrition, but it's it's usually not the number one focus. You know, I've gotten into some situations before where, customers got a great operation. They're buying cattle. They're doing everything right at the chute. But, you know, have a saying, there's some things you can't fix with a needle. You've got to be able to put good nutrition in front of these cattle. And so I think the implants to some extent or to some customers are a little bit of I don't want to say an afterthought, because there's plenty that use them, but there's some that don't. And I just think, you know, I've heard things like, well, it's an extra step at the chute. I got to have an extra guy to implant them. You know, and at the end of the day, I think those are all hurdles we can overcome just with some education, some training. It's not much harder than giving a shot if you've got those cattle caught in the chute. But there's not a nutritionist that usually calls on stocker guys, right? Because you're running them on wheat pasture or you're running them on summer grass and you start giving a little protein when the grass gets, you know, poor quality, you know when to do that. You're not actively working with a nutritionist that's coming by once every couple months to, you know, make some implant or nutritional recommendation. So I just think there's more need. And it's not that we don't want to support those guys. You know, as Zoetis, we do. But there's so many more stocker guys than there are feedlot customers, right? That part of you take this cow-calf segment, so many customers, we just can't get to all of them. So we depend on some resellers and vets and other channels to help trickle that information down to support those customers.
So when we're talking about implanting and maybe adding that into the mix, do we reach out to our local vet? Because like you said, there isn't necessarily a nutritionalist that reaches out to a lot of us stocker guys. In your recommendation, should we reach out to our vet? Should we get a hold of our Zoetis rep? Where do those conversations start to help us make those decisions of, is this something that we want to start doing in our program?
Yeah, great question. And the answer would be both. Yeah, I'd encourage you, reach out to your local veterinarian. A lot of the veterinarians have years of experience with implants and can provide some support. If for some reason they're not comfortable with that, then, hopefully they have a contact with Zoetis. But yeah, also the local sales reps, reach out to them. Even myself as a nutritionist, I get involved in a lot of those conversations. The sales rep will direct me, or they'll send me a name and number and ask me to reach out. So, because as we're considering whether or not to implant, I think that's one consideration. And then, the next step will be, okay, what do we implant with?
Right.
And I think we need to consider days, because we have some short duration products. We have some long duration products. We also need to consider nutrition and production goals. At the end of the day, I think every stocker should be considering it. I'm not saying it's right for 100% of them, but if a stocker customer isn't getting a premium in writing for an all natural or hormone free calf, I think they should be seriously considering it. And there's very few customers that are actually getting that premium, in writing. The very few that, if they have them locked up, they have a contract set up for an all natural program, by all means, capitalize on those dollars. No harm there. But if they're not getting that, locked up in contract, they really need to be considering it. I mean, it's a technology that has about a 50 to 1 ROI on it. So it's something we would like for them to consider.
Bryan Bernhard with Zoetis Animal Health raises many good points that, yes, one should consider. For more on implant products from Zoetis Animal Health, check out the show notes for this episode at ranchitupshow.com. We have all the details, or if you want to reach out to Bryan directly and visit, get a hold of Beck and I, and we will get you all connected. Time for another break. Now, when we come back, we talk markets, cow herd numbers, heifer retention, even the status of the dairy herd and how beef on dairy relates to us in the beef business. Got lots to cover. Keep it locked in the Ranch It Up radio show. We'll be right back.